The box in the wall. The sound of hammering echoed through the quiet house. David's shirt clung to his back as he worked, sweat dripping from his forehead. Renovating the old guest room wasn't part of the plan, but he wanted to surprise his wife Lena for their 20th wedding anniversary. He was knocking down the back panel of the built-in closet when something strange happened. The hammer hit something hollow. He paused. The wall sounded different here. Too empty, too off. Curious. David dropped the hammer and gently pulled back a layer of wood. That's when he saw it. A small metal box, dust-covered, wedged inside the wall like someone had carefully hidden it decades ago. He frowned. There was no reason a box should be inside their wall, not unless someone put it there on purpose. David's fingers trembled slightly as he pulled it out. The box wasn't locked, but it had a weight to it, heavy, emotionally heavy, like it carried a story that wasn't meant to be found. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside were two things, a stack of old photographs tied with a red ribbon, and a folded envelope with his name on it. His chest tightened. He looked at the name, written in Lena's handwriting. Neat, familiar, but it was the date on the envelope that made his heart drop. 2005. David sat down on the floor, suddenly feeling like the air had been sucked from the room. That was the year they got married. Why would Lena write him a letter 20 years ago and hide it in the wall? His hand shook as he opened it. David, if you've found this, it means the truth couldn't stay buried forever. I want you to know that I loved you. I still do. But I couldn't marry you without hiding what I did and what I lost. I don't know how else to say this except to let you see for yourself. Please forgive me if you can. Lena, he read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't make sense. What did she mean? What I lost? What truth? Hands trembling, he untied the ribbon from the stack of photos. The top one was old, faded like it had been taken with a disposable camera. A woman, much younger, stood in the frame. It was Lena, but not the Lena he knew. This version of her was wild-eyed, thinner, with dyed black hair and a cigarette in her hand. She looked scared, or maybe defiant. He flipped to the next photo. Another man, unfamiliar, tattooed. His arm was wrapped around her. Photo after photo told a story David didn't recognize. Different towns, different years. Lena in strange places with people he'd never seen, but then came the photo that knocked the breath out of his lungs. Lena in a hospital bed, holding a baby. A baby. There was no mistaking the expression on her face. She was crying, but not from pain, from joy. She was younger, but it was unmistakably her. David stared at the image, stunned. They never had children. Lena had told him she couldn't have them, that she had a condition, but this photo, this baby, she had a child and never told him. The room felt cold all of a sudden. The floor beneath him seemed to tilt. His heart pounded in his chest like a drum. Questions flooded his mind. Who was the baby? Where was the child now? Why did she keep this a secret for 2 decades? He stood up slowly, box in hand, and walked downstairs in a daze. Lena was in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred. Soup on the stove. She turned and smiled when she saw him, but the moment she saw the box in his hands, the color drained from her face. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stared. David held up the photo, the one of her with the baby. "Who is this?" he asked quietly. Lena's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes shimmered, not with confusion, but guilt, deep, raw guilt. The silence stretched like a blade between them. David's voice was firmer now. "You told me you couldn't have children." Still, she said nothing. The pot on the stove began to boil over, hissing, bubbling, but neither of them moved to stop it. Then finally Lena whispered, "I didn't want you to find that box." Too late. David's hands clenched the photo tighter. "You need to tell me everything, now." Lena closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. Then she said something that turned David's world upside down. "He's alive. And he doesn't know who I am." The name she never spoke. David didn't move, didn't speak. Her words kept ringing in his ears. "He's alive, and he doesn't know who I am." He looked at Lena, really looked at her, like he was seeing a stranger in his kitchen. The woman he'd spent 20 years loving had hidden an entire life before him. "Start talking," he said firmly. Lena sat down slowly at the edge of the kitchen chair, her hands shaking. She avoided his eyes. "I was 23, young, lost, and in a really bad place." David didn't interrupt. He just stood still, gripping the photo in one hand, the box in the other. "I was in a relationship with someone dangerous," Lena said. "At first he seemed charming, like he'd save me, but he didn't. He ruined me, used me, trapped me." She paused, her voice cracking. "Then I found out I was pregnant." David stared at her, struggling to understand. "So what did you do?" Lena's eyes welled with tears. "I ran. I was in a small town 2 states away by the time I gave birth. I thought I could raise him. I really believed I could be enough. But I had no job, no support, no money. The only thing I had was fear." Of what? That his father would find us and kill us both. David's stomach dropped. "I stayed in a shelter for 3 months. Then I made the hardest choice of my life. I gave the baby up." She covered her mouth with her hand as the tears finally spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't even hold him again. I left him in the hospital with a note. I told them not to find me." David sat down across from her, eyes wide. "You abandoned your son." "I saved him," she whispered. "That man, his father, he would have destroyed him. I didn't do it because I didn't love him. I did it because I did." He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Lena, the woman who cried at animal shelters and knitted socks for strangers, had made this impossible choice and never told him, not in 20 years. "And then you met me," he said quietly. Lena nodded. "You were the first good thing in my life. And when we fell in love, I didn't know how to tell you. I thought, if I buried it deep enough, I could start over." David shook his head slowly. "You built our marriage on a secret." "Yes," she said, her voice nearly breaking. "I've lived with the guilt every day." He looked back down at the photo. The baby, the boy. "How old is he now?" he asked. 20, she replied softly. "He'd be 20 this year." David leaned back in his chair, stunned. He could have been a stepfather this whole time, or maybe even a father figure, but he'd never had that chance. Lena had taken it away without asking. He rubbed his hands over his face. "And you never tried to find him again?" "I did," she said quickly. "Years later. I couldn't stop thinking about him. I tried to search through adoption records, but everything was sealed." David stood up, overwhelmed. "You should have told me." "I know," she said, her voice full of regret. "But by then I was afraid. Afraid you'd leave me. Afraid you'd hate me." He looked at her, his wife, and for the first time in 20 years, he wasn't sure who she really was. "What's his name?" he asked finally. Lena hesitated. "I never gave him one." David blinked. "What?" "The hospital named him. I never knew what it was. I couldn't bear to ask. I was too afraid that knowing would break me." The silence in the kitchen was heavy. Everything felt wrong, like the house had shifted on its foundation. And then David asked the one question neither of them was ready for. "Do you want to find him now?" Lena looked up, startled. "What? You've carried this pain for 2 decades. We can't undo the past, Lena, but if he's out there, don't you want to know who he became?" Her lips trembled. "I do, more than anything. But I'm scared." David's voice softened, though his heart still ached. "Then let me be scared with you, but we do it together." A silence fell between them. Not of anger, but something else, something unspoken. A shift. For the first time, Lena reached across the table and held his hand. "There's one more thing," she whispered. David tensed. She opened a drawer and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "I kept this for years. It's the only lead I have." He took the paper and opened it. It was a nurse's handwritten note, faded but still readable. "Baby transferred to Willow Creek Adoption Services. Confidential ID, the 1937B. David looked up. "Where is Willow Creek?" "A private agency in Vermont," Lena said. "I found out it closed down years ago. Burned down, actually. But someone somewhere must still have the records." David nodded slowly, his heart pounding. "Then that's where we start." The trail of ashes. The next morning, David packed 2 small bags and placed them near the door. Lena watched him, still unsure if he was truly with her, or simply running. "On instinct. You don't have to come," she said quietly. David turned to her. "You buried this alone for 20 years. You won't dig it up alone." They left before sunrise, heading toward Vermont. The roads were long and empty, framed by forests and fading autumn leaves. Neither of them spoke much. The silence wasn't angry, it was heavy, thoughtful. Willow Creek Adoption Services had burned down nearly 14 years ago. Lena had learned that through a desperate phone call years ago, one she'd never told David about. But now, she shared everything as they drove. They said it was a fire caused by faulty wiring, destroyed most of the building. "Were any files saved?" David asked. She shook her head. "They told me all adoption records were lost, but I didn't believe them. I still don't." They reached the small town just after noon. It was the kind of place where people still waved at strangers and shops closed for lunch. The adoption agency had once stood on the corner of Birch Street. Now it was just an overgrown lot surrounded by a rusted fence and a sign that read, "Property owned by Town of Wethersfield, no trespassing." David parked across the street. "What now?" "I want to see it," Lena said. They walked to the gate. The ground was uneven, broken bricks still visible beneath weeds. Lena's eyes scanned the spot like she was searching for a ghost. "I stood here once," she whispered, "the year after we married. I came, but I couldn't bring myself to walk in." David reached for her hand, and for the first time in 2 days, she didn't pull away. A woman's voice startled them. "You looking for something?" They turned to see an elderly woman stepping out of the corner bakery. David hesitated. "We were just remembering someone." The woman narrowed her eyes, then her expression softened. "You're not the first. That place, it held a lot of secrets. People still come around, looking for the past." Lena stepped closer. "Did you know the people who worked there?" The woman nodded slowly. "I did. My sister-in-law was the records clerk. She passed years ago, but she used to talk about the children." David reached into his pocket and pulled out the slip of paper. "Do you know if anything was ever saved from the fire?" She frowned and took the note from him. "Willow Creek ID numbers. Yes, I remember these." Her eyes narrowed. "This one's old, real old." Lena's voice was shaky. "He would have been a newborn, 20 years ago." The woman looked between them. "There was one man, a social worker. He took some files home, said he couldn't bear to see the records burned. Everyone thought he was crazy. I think he still lives just outside of town." David leaned forward. "Do you know his name?" She hesitated. "Raymond Ellis. But he's difficult." "We don't mind difficult," David said quickly. The woman scribbled down an address on the back of a receipt. "He lives up past the old train station. Blue farmhouse with a windmill." "Thank you," Lena said, her voice thick with emotion. "I hope you find what you're looking for," the woman replied, already turning away. The road to Raymond Ellis's farmhouse was gravel and barely marked. Trees arched overhead, casting long shadows across the windshield. By the time they reached the blue house with the broken windmill, Lena's hands were trembling. David knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Finally, the door opened just a crack. A pale, weathered face peeked out. The man had sharp blue eyes and suspicion written all over his features. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. David cleared his throat. "Are you Raymond Ellis?" "Who's asking?" "We're looking for information about an adoption from Willow Creek 20 years ago." The man's face didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. "You people always come years too late." Lena stepped forward. "Please, I'm his mother." That made the door open just a bit more. Raymond stepped out. "Name?" "I never gave him one," she admitted. "He was assigned a code, 1937B. Raymond rubbed the side of his jaw. "I don't remember codes, but I kept a few files. Names, notes, things I couldn't throw away." He looked at them both, then sighed. "Wait here." The door shut. Minutes passed. Long, slow minutes. The kind that stretch your nerves to the edge. When Raymond returned, he held a small box, wooden, cracked, and dusty. He set it on the porch step. "You find what you need in there." David opened it slowly. Inside were faded papers, old photographs, and a single manila folder marked "Private." He picked it up, opened it carefully. And there it was, infant male, transferred to private care under the name Aiden C. Marlowe. Lena gasped. "He has a name." Raymond nodded. "He was adopted by a single woman, a schoolteacher, moved to Maine not long after." "Do you have an address?" David asked. Raymond looked unsure. "She changed her name later. Married someone. I can give you the last known record I kept, but no promises. That folder's 20 years old." David clutched the paper like it was a lifeline. "It's enough." Raymond stared at them a moment longer. "Be careful. Not every kid adopted out of that place had an easy life." Lena's face turned pale. "What do you mean?" Raymond didn't answer. He just closed the door behind him. David and Lena sat in the car, staring at the name on the paper, Aiden C. Marlowe, born July 18th, 2005. "He's real," Lena whispered. "He's alive." David nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed on the word scribbled in the bottom corner of the form, in red ink, underlined twice. "Restricted placement, cause undisclosed." The name in the shadows. Lena sat in the car, her knuckles white as she gripped the folder on her lap. The word "restricted" echoed in her head like a warning siren. What could they possibly mean by that? And why wasn't she told before? David kept glancing at her as they drove back toward the nearest town with internet access. They decided not to wait. Not anymore. Every hour wasted felt like another step away from the truth. They found a quiet motel on the outskirts of a neighboring town. It was old, but clean. David set up his laptop on the chipped desk while Lena laid out the contents of the folder on the bed. Adoption forms, care logs, a faded picture of a baby wrapped in a green blanket, and a final document. An adoption confirmation form with the name of the adoptive mother, Claire Marlowe. Residence at time of adoption, Bangor, Maine. David typed quickly. "There's a Claire Marlowe listed in Bangor, but it says she passed away 6 years ago." Lena's heart sank. "So she's gone." "But wait," David continued. "It says she was survived by her husband, Alan Marlowe, and a son, Aiden Marlowe." Lena whispered the name. Aiden. David clicked on a school listing. It looks like Aiden was enrolled in a high school in Bangor until about 3 years ago. But then suddenly, he vanishes. No records, no social media, nothing. Lena stood and began pacing. "You don't just vanish at 17. David nodded. "Unless you don't want to be found, or someone didn't want him to be." David leaned in. "There's one odd thing. Claire Marlowe had filed multiple complaints with Child Protective Services over the course of 10 years. Most were dismissed, but the last one, just months before her death, was marked urgent. Then, silence." Lena's throat tightened. "Do you think she was protecting him from someone?" David didn't answer. Instead, he looked back at the folder. He flipped it open again and noticed something strange. A tiny slip of paper wedged between the back of the manila folder and the cardboard. Carefully, he pulled it free. It was a handwritten note. "If anything happens to me, check drawer. In 12 at White Pine Storage. Locker 478. CM." Lena's eyes widened. "That's Claire's handwriting." David searched quickly. White Pine Storage was real, and it was only 2 hours away. The next morning they reached the storage facility. The woman at the front desk was reluctant to give access, but Lena pleaded. She showed her the note, explained they were following up on a missing family member, even showed the folder from the old agency. Eventually, the woman gave in. "Locker 478. Here's the key. Just bring it back." They walked into the massive, cold storage hall. The concrete echoed beneath their feet. Lena's hands were trembling as she unlocked the metal door to Unit 478. Dust swirled in the air as the door creaked open. Inside, stacked neatly, were old boxes and a worn-down metal filing cabinet, drawer 12. David pulled it open. There, inside, were dozens of documents, medical records, police reports, letters, and right at the top, a sealed envelope labeled, "To whoever finds this, I'm sorry. Please protect him." Claire Marlowe. Lena opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a letter written in a shaky hand. They said it was just trauma. They said he'd grow out of it, but Aiden saw things no child should. "When I found out what his first foster family did, I nearly died inside. They used him for money, for attention, but not love. Never love. By the time I got him, he wouldn't speak, wouldn't look anyone in the eye. He flinched at shadows, and every night he screamed in his sleep. I tried everything. Therapy, school, patience. But the agency never told me everything. They knew more. Something happened before I got him, and someone didn't want me to know. The day before I filed that last report, someone followed us home. I saw them. They watched from across the street. Then, nothing. I was in a car accident a week later. They called it random. If you're reading this, then they never told the truth. Please, protect him. He didn't deserve this." Lena's knees buckled, and she sat on the cold floor. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He was hurt. My baby. He was—" David knelt beside her, his voice low. "We were looking for a name, but what we've found is a trail." He held up a photo from the drawer. It showed Aiden, maybe 12 years old, standing in front of a Christmas tree. He looked thin, pale. His eyes looked directly at the camera. But there was no smile. Just hollowness. Lena touched the photo like she could reach through. A time. David kept going through the drawer. At the very bottom, behind a stack of letters, was a faded envelope. No return address. Just one word written in red ink. Redacted. Inside was a document stamped by the original adoption agency. Subject, Aiden Marlowe, 1937B. Classification, Special Observation. Reason, Incident involving biological father. File sealed permanently. Note, transfer initiated early due to concern. For infant safety. Threat level classified. David whispered, "What does that mean?" Lena stared at the words. Biological father. Her voice broke. "David, I never told you his name, because I thought he was gone. But what if he wasn't? What if he found Aiden?" David's eyes hardened. "You think he went after your son? I think someone wanted to bury it, and they nearly did." The photo in Lena's hand trembled. A child who never smiled. A woman who died trying to protect him. Files sealed, and a past that someone was still trying to hide. David turned to Lena, his voice steady. "We need to find Aiden, now, before someone else does." Faces in the fog. The sky was turning a dull grey as David and Lena drove northeast toward the last known location connected to Aiden Marlowe. a foster counselor's office listed on a form buried deep in the white pine storage drawer. Neither of them spoke for the first hour. Lena sat in the passenger seat, staring at the faded photograph of the 12-year-old boy, her son. Every time she looked at his eyes, she felt a twist in her chest. There was something haunting in them, something older than a child should carry. Finally, she broke the silence. "Do you think he remembers me?" David glanced at her. "I think he spent years wondering the same thing." Lena lowered her gaze. "I never wanted to give him away. You have to believe that." David's jaw tightened, but his voice was soft. "I know I didn't before, but now I do." It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was the first step toward healing. They reached the counselor's office by early afternoon. It was inside a modest building on the edge of a quiet town. A wooden plaque near the door read, "Hope Path Youth Services." Inside, a middle-aged man in a sweater vest greeted them cautiously. He introduced himself as Dr. Caleb Monroe. "You're asking about Aiden Marlowe?" His tone shifted immediately from polite to wary. "Yes," David said. "We think Lena is his biological mother." Caleb leaned back in his chair, studying Lena's face. "You look like him." Lena's eyes welled with tears. "Do you know where he is?" Caleb hesitated. "Aiden left the system the moment he turned 18, quietly. No contact, no social media. He was smart, always quiet, always watching." "Was he all right?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. Caleb looked down. He had scars, not just the kind you see, but he was resilient, strong, too strong sometimes. David leaned forward. "Do you know where he went?" "I think he was trying to find answers," Caleb said. "He asked questions about his past, too many. After Claire died, he started acting differently, like he didn't trust anyone." Lena's heart pounded. "Please, we need to see him. I need to tell him the truth." Caleb nodded. Slowly, "I kept one forwarding address. He asked me to send his final school documents there. I haven't heard from him since." He pulled out a file from a locked drawer and scribbled an address onto a sticky note. "Here, it's a cabin, up in the woods, off-grid." David took the note. "Thank you." Caleb looked at Lena. "He might not be the boy you remember. Life didn't treat him kindly." The sun was sinking by the time they turned onto the forest road that led to the old cabin. The trees closed in thick around them, and there was no cell signal. The world felt quiet, too quiet. They parked on a dirt patch near a clearing. The cabin sat 100 feet ahead, wooden and weathered, smoke curling faintly from the chimney. David grabbed Lena's hand. "You sure you want to do this?" "I have to." They walked together to the front porch. David knocked twice, footsteps. The door opened slowly, and there he was, a young man in his early 20s, broad shoulders, short brown hair, dark eyes that flicked from Lena to David. Guarded, tense, his jaw tightened like he was preparing to run or fight. "Yes?" Lena froze. Her voice caught in her throat. "Aiden?" David asked gently. The young man didn't answer. Lena stepped forward. I'm your mother." Aiden didn't blink. "No, you're not." His voice was calm, cold. "I was told my mother left me, that she didn't want me, that she didn't care." Lena's voice broke. "That's not true. I was a child myself. I didn't have a choice, but I never stopped thinking about you." Aiden's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" David stepped in. "To give you the truth. About everything. Your adoption, Claire, the files, the man who hurt you." "I know all of it," Aiden interrupted. "I already found out. Claire kept everything, letters, notes, your name, your photo. I've known who you were for years." Lena's breath caught. You knew." "I watched you," Aiden said quietly. 3 years ago, I saw you at a farmer's market. You smiled at some kid. I waited for you to recognize me, but you didn't. I didn't know what. You looked like, Lena cried. I didn't even know your name until last week. Aiden looked down, his hands clenched. I spent my life wondering why no one fought for me. David's voice was low. She's here now. We're both here to fight, to protect you. You're not alone anymore. Aiden didn't respond. A long silence hung in the air. Then finally, he opened the door wider. Come in. Inside, the cabin was sparse but clean. A wood-burning stove heated the room. Books lined the wall. Aiden poured water for them, then sat across from his mother. I want to believe you, he said finally, but believing hurts. Lena nodded. I understand. That's why we brought this. She pulled the folder from her bag. The one. From Raymond Ellis and the letter from Claire. Aiden opened the envelope with shaking hands. As he read his adoptive mother's words, his hard expression began to crumble. She loved you, Lena whispered. She died trying to protect you. Aiden nodded once, eyes glistening. David noticed a small photo frame on a shelf. Aiden and Claire, smiling, the only smile they'd seen on his face. She was everything, Aiden said. And someone took her from me. David frowned. You think it wasn't an accident? I know it wasn't. Aiden stood and walked to a drawer. He pulled out a folder. Inside were surveillance photos, notes, newspaper clippings, even a license plate scribbled on a page. I've been tracking him. The man who followed Claire, the one from the agency. He didn't disappear. He just changed names. David's pulse quickened. Who is he? Aiden looked up. His voice was dark. He's not gone. He turned his gaze to Lena. He's your past, but he's still watching us. And then, glass shattered behind them. A bullet slammed into the wall just inches from Aiden's head. David grabbed Lena and pulled her to the ground. Outside, footsteps, leaves rustling. They weren't alone. The final door. The gunshot echoed in, Lena's ears like thunder. David dragged her to the floor, shielding her with his body as shards of broken window glass rained across the wooden floorboards. Aiden grabbed the old hunting rifle from beneath his couch and crouched by the doorway, his eyes scanning the trees through the remaining shards of window. Stay low, he hissed. Outside, footsteps crunched the fallen leaves. Slow. Calculated. Whoever was out there wasn't rushing. They were confident. They knew this place. They had probably watched it for days. Lena's heart pounded. Who is it, Aiden? Do you know them? Aiden didn't take his eyes off the woods. His name was Mark Holden when I traced him last. He used to be a foster, emplacement supervisor, but his real name is Marcus Halloran. David's eyes widened. That's the name on the sealed documents, the one connected to the incident. Your biological father? Lena froze. No, she whispered. He died. I was told he killed himself after I pressed charges. He faked it, Aiden interrupted, and he never stopped following me. Or you. Another sound, metal scraping. A shadow moved between the trees. Aiden rose, silent and focused. I need to draw him out. If he gets inside, we won't make it. David grabbed his arm. No, there has to be another way. But Aiden was already moving toward the back door. Lena's voice cracked. Please, don't do this alone. Aiden looked back at her. And in that second, she saw not the haunted child, but a grown man determined to face the ghosts that had hunted him his whole life. I've been alone too long, he said. But not anymore. He slipped out the back. The next 10 minutes were agonizing. Lena sat frozen in the corner of the cabin, clutching David's hand so tightly his knuckles turned white. Every sound outside, every twig snap, every rustle made her flinch. Then suddenly shouting, a scuffle. Another shot, but muffled, a thud and silence. David rushed to the door, opening it cautiously. Lena followed, her legs shaking. Aiden stood over a man pinned to the ground. His face was older, grizzled, but unmistakable. Marcus Halloran. Aidan had struck him across the temple with the butt of the rifle, and he now lay groaning, dazed and bloody. "I told you to stay away," Aidan growled. The man sneered. "You were supposed to disappear." Lena stepped closer, her voice shaking. "Why? Why didn't you leave him alone?" Marcus laughed weakly. "Because he was my legacy, and your punishment." Her breath caught. "You hurt him. You hurt a baby." "I did what was necessary," Marcus spat. "He was mine. You gave him away, and he became someone else's project. But I always knew where he was. I made sure he never forgot." David called the police, reading off their GPS coordinates. Help was on the way. Aidan stood frozen over the man who had broken his childhood, torn apart his chance at a normal life, and hunted him for years. He could end it right now. One pull of the trigger, Lena stepped forward, slowly placing her hand on his arm. "You're not him," she whispered. Aidan's jaw clenched, eyes burning. "You're stronger than him, and you always were." The rifle lowered. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, Marcus Halloran was arrested and taken into custody. They found surveillance equipment in his truck, evidence of months, maybe years, of quiet stalking. It was finally over. Later that night, back inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly as Lena, David, and Aidan sat together for the first time. In decades, there was peace. "I used to wonder what it would be like," Aidan said quietly, "to have a mother who actually looked for me, a family that didn't use me." Lena's eyes welled. "I wish I had done more. I wish I'd known." "Sooner, you did now," he replied, "and that counts." David handed Aidan a small wooden box, the same one he'd found in the attic all those weeks ago. This started it all. Aidan opened it. Inside were the hospital bands, the birth certificate, a picture of Lena at 17 holding a swaddled baby, tears in her eyes, and something else, a tiny charm shaped like a key, worn and old. Aidan picked it up. Lena smiled through tears. "It was yours. I kept it all these years, hoping maybe one day." He didn't speak. He just nodded and held the charm tight in his palm. 1 month later, Aidan moved out of the cabin. He didn't say goodbye to the trees or the silence. He left behind the journals filled with names and addresses and the old nightmares. He moved into a small town not far from David and Lena. He even started taking courses, psychology and criminal justice. "Maybe I can help kids like me," he told Lena one day. She hugged him tightly. "You already have." 1 year later, David opened a letter postmarked from the state. Inside was a document, petition for legal name change. New name, Aidan Ellis. Lena smiled when she saw it. He had chosen David's last name. Final line. In the end, the box didn't just hold memories. It held the truth. And once that truth came into the light, it didn't destroy them. It saved them. The end.